our greatest client of all time. We're talking 20 plus transactions with him. He sends us an email about a $400,000 rental he owns. He's got a simple question. Should I re-rent it out, sell it, or 1031 exchange it? Now, this is a big decision for him and for us. Here's how we use Claude in under 12 minutes to get him an answer that he could trust.
We are Meryl and Kristi Jencks, and we are both active real estate agents, investors, coaches, and parents of 8 kids. So we're always looking for ways where we can be more efficient and continue to serve our clients at a higher level. In this video, I'm going to show you an in-depth walkthrough of how I used Claude to help provide our client with a detailed and highly valuable analysis that helped him make the critical decision of what he ought to do with his rental property that he is now dealing with a vacancy on. So I get this email from my client wanting to know, now that he is facing this vacancy, what's the best move for his property? What's the wisest financial decision for him to make? And as an investor myself, I get it. Sometimes that's complicated and difficult to decide and feel like we're making the right decision. So he was really looking at 3 viable options. Option number 1, should he put it back on the rental market and re-rent it? Option number 2, should he look at just selling the property and cashing out, potentially moving the money into a different kind of investment? Or option number 3, should he look at doing a 1031 exchange and potentially transferring to a different property? And if he were to make that move, he wanted an analysis of whether or not he could maintain similar cash flow on a different property. Now, my gut already told me that getting similar cash flow on a different property, even with the large down payment he would have because of the equity that he had built up, was probably not going to be super likely. But either way, to provide this level of a detailed analysis, the old way, I would have had to build a spreadsheet. I would have had to get out a calculator. I would have had to spend a couple of hours putting together a really detailed response if I wanted to help him with a really detailed analysis that would help him make the right decision. Now, I have a different first move. My new first step was to determine how Claude could help save me time and provide a better response to this client. But here's a really important first step, and it's one that many agents miss. The first thing that I did, besides just taking the email from my client and pasting that into Claude, you could do that. You could just take an email from a client, give it to an AI chatbot, and say, how should I respond to this? And what you're going to get is a really confident sounding answer, but one that isn't really backed up by data and doesn't really support the exact numbers of this house. Sure, AI can search national or local headlines about what the market is doing, and AI can sometimes even go on and see what's currently available. What are the other active listings that it can find on Zillow or some other website that displays rental listings? But it isn't going to give us very much about what has actually recently rented or sold, and hyper-local, hyper-specific data about what's really happening in this client's submarket. So I gave Claude the email from the client, but then I also gave it 2 exports from my MLS. So pretty much all MLSs have the ability for you to export your search results into what's called a CSV or an Excel file that you can also upload into Claude. So I went in and did a search parameters for homes in his neighborhood that were of similar size and year built, just like you would run comps for a CMA type thing. And I did that for his property, both for the sales and for the rental results, and I also uploaded those to Claude so that it would have all the relevant context. This is really important. If you don't provide it with the actual data from your MLS, once again, you're going to get a very confident sounding answer, but not one that is based on the facts of what is happening in the market. And then I just asked Claude, what should I tell him? No detailed prompt, no 17 paragraph exact explanation of how I wanted it to process the data. I just gave it the data, gave it the email, and said, what should I tell him? This is a huge difference, and this is one that I would love for more real estate agents to see and experiment with. You don't need a complex engineered prompt for this kind of thing. Just give Claude the information, tell it what you need help with, and let it do its thing. It's actually really awesome at helping you solve these kinds of problems. One more little detail is that I also asked my client to provide me with his approximate loan balance and interest rate so that Claude would do a much more accurate job calculating, his approximate net if he sold it and his approximate cash flow if he were to exchange his current interest rate for a new market level interest rate, and kind of help us really look at the accurate math of what he would be netting or what he would be receiving if he followed any of those particular paths. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Claude doesn't answer the question right away. It actually pushes back a little bit. It doesn't answer my question directly. It tells me my client is asking the wrong question. The first line, Claude says, he's anchoring the wrong metric. The client is comparing 3 options on cash flow. What does each option pay him per month? But Claude points out the real metric, what keeping the property is silently giving him every single month, the thing he'd lose if he sold. That is what I wanted you to notice. The search engine just answers your question. A calculator runs your numbers. Claude pressure tests whether or not the question is the right one in the first place. That is an operations superpower that most agents have never demonstrated. And it only worked because Claude had the actual data to push back with. Without those MLS exports, Claude is guessing. With them, Claude can actually look at the sales, look at the rentals, and say, based on what you've given me, here's what your client doesn't see yet. The reframe is this. Don't compare 3 monthly cash flow numbers. Compare what the equity is actually earning today against what it could earn if he deployed it somewhere else. That's the question that we should have been asking from the start. So Claude gets to work on running the numbers for me. So first, we look at the equity, but not just how much is the property worth minus how much does he owe, but it actually looks at like an estimated net sheet. Hey, this is how much you would net if you actually sold the property. But then it takes it a step further and helps me calculate exactly how much capital gains tax exposure the client is likely looking at if he were to sell the property now, because he doesn't just get to take all that money and run if he just sells it and cashes out. There's capital gain exposure there. In addition to the capital gains exposure, there is also depreciation recapture. And so there's all sorts of tax consequences associated with the property. So it helps me figure out really quickly how much he would actually have after tax liabilities if he were to sell the property, which then allows us to build an analysis of how he might be able to redeploy that capital. Claude quickly helps us analyze how much his annual cash flow is, but even more important, it looks at his annual ROI, his equity position compared to how much cash flow that he is generating. And then it calculated a blended return. How much money is he making on this property across all avenues? So of course there's the cash flow. Then there's also the loan mortgage pay down balance of the loan that's getting paid down over time. Plus there's the value of the property going up over time. And it estimates that the blended return annualized on this property is over 20%. So he's getting a 20% annualized return on a property that he already owns. And if he were to sell it, he would lose a bunch of that equity. And that's the move that I wouldn't have made on my own. Claude reframes the mortgage rate as a huge part of the asset that the client already owns. If he were to sell and cash out or do a 1031 exchange, he likely loses that rate and cash flow return and the 20% annualized return that he's getting on that property every year forever. Then, of course, it helped me analyze the 1031 exchange option. Sure, he could 1031 exchange and avoid all of the tax liability problems of potentially selling the property, but he would be replacing the property with a new one that is at a much higher rate, which obviously is going to be extremely detrimental to his cash flow and ROI position, even though he's preserving the tax liability that he would have had if he sold it. Even if he did the 1031 exchange and bought a really great property that was outperforming the market, he would likely be losing his higher $900 to $1,000 a month worth of cash flow and exchanging it for something that's much, much less than that, $300 or $400 a month, most likely. That's the trap. There's one more piece, and this is the part that proves you're an agent, not just a calculator. A 1031 exchange isn't just a building, it's about what you are trading into. This particular client was interested in potentially selling this property that was more inside the city and was going to potentially exchange it for a newer property that was in the far suburbs, but it was new construction. Because I had already given Claude some of the data from my MLS, we actually knew that that market where the new construction is was not performing as well as the location where his home was already located. Because where you're competing against new construction, at least in our area, the builders are offering these really, really great interest rate incentives and is making it really hard for the resale market to see significant appreciation. So he would be trading a property that's more in the city for a newer property, yes, that would potentially need less maintenance, but it wouldn't be seeing the same level of equity gains. It's a move that might look like progress because you're getting a newer property, but it's actually a downgrade. A new construction property with a softer market and a higher interest rate is just simply an asset with worse fundamentals. And the best part is that Claude composed the email response that I could send to my client explaining all of this in a way that was more elegant than I could have said it if I had spent an hour writing it. So Claude writes a beautiful email for me that gives the clients all three options back, along with the pros and cons of each of those options, and then makes the recommendation that he should re-rent the property if his goal is to continue to grow his money at the highest rate possible. The outcome, the client responded within minutes saying, "That was excellent advice. Thank you. I'm going to re-rent it." Here's my favorite part about this entire workflow is that it really didn't take very much of my time. I feel like I was able to provide a complex, detailed analysis to my client, breaking down each of the options, the net that he would get, the capital gains he would be exposed to, the new rate, the new cash flow, multiple layers of analysis. Claude handled it all in about 10 minutes, and then I sent the response back to him with a really detailed breakdown of what my recommendation to him would be and why. And then I was able to continue to strengthen my relationship with that client so we can continue to do transactions hopefully for many more years to come. So next time you get a complex email or text message from a client asking something about an analysis that you're not quite so sure how to answer accurately or thoroughly, don't just write a generic and not very helpful response. Put the email into Claude. If applicable, give Claude the data that it is going to need to help provide an accurate answer, such as the comps or the interest rate or any other information that's relevant so it can do a detailed, in-depth dive. What does the client owe on the property? What are his outcomes? What are his goals? If you give Claude that level of information, it will be able to give you an output that's probably better than you would have been able to do on your own in less time. I hope you found this information helpful. If you would like to continue to see more Claude tips that real estate agents can use to be more effective and faster and more efficient in their business, please like and subscribe or share this with someone who you might know who could benefit from the same information. We appreciate you tuning in.